Here begins lecture on Act 3 of Hamlet. So again, we'll pick up on many of the same themes that we were talking about when we were discussing Acts 1 and 2. Polonius discusses how Ophelia is to approach Hamlet. Remember that Polonius has promised Claudius that he's going to loosen his daughter on Hamlet. And so we talk again about the idea of actors and directors, and notice the instruction that Polonius gives to his daughter. Before she is to meet Hamlet, he tells her, read on this book that shows of such exercise may color your loneliness. And so he is directing her to pretend like she's reading a book, because reading a book expresses loneliness, and you want to give Hamlet the impression that you're really lonely so that he can give you something that may reveal his emotions. And again, he is directing her on how to act in order to get Hamlet to admit something. Notice the phrase, notice the advice that he gives to Ophelia, and notice the effect of this advice, not on Ophelia, but on Claudius. Read on this book, he tells his daughter, that show of such an exercise may color your loneliness. We're oft to blame in this, 'tis too much proved that with devotion's visage and pious action we do sugar over the devil himself. And this is an important observation. With devotion's visage and pious action, we do sugar over the devil himself. Polonius just makes this remark in passing, but notice the effect of this observation on Claudius, who says in an aside, and an aside is another device used in drama. This is a device used in drama to give speech that is only audible to the speaker. In other words, when Claudius says this, only he and we, the audience, can hear it, audible to the speaker and to the audience. It is almost like a private speech that again expresses the speaker's psychological mindset, but it also reveals to the audience that psychological mindset. An aside is almost a variation on a soliloquy. The only difference is that in an aside, other characters are present on stage. In a soliloquy, the character stands all by himself. And when Polonius makes that observation, Claudius says to himself, "O 'tis too true, how smart a lash that speech doth give my conscience. The harlot's cheek beautied with plastering art is not more ugly to the thing that helps it than is my deed to my most painted word." And so here we get the confession that Hamlet has been looking for. Hamlet will never hear these words, but we, the audience, find out at this moment that the ghost has been telling the truth, that Claudius really is guilty of having killed his brother, and that although Claudius is painting his words, nevertheless his deeds are ugly, and he knows that he's sugaring over a very, very horrible sin, the sin of murder, with nice words. And so, this is super important as well. Now, as Claudius and Polonius go into hiding, we see yet another play within a play. We've already seen it once before when Claudius and Polonius were standing aside, and we see it again at this moment, where these two characters, Claudius and Polonius, are basically acting as audience members, and Hamlet and Ophelia will essentially be the actors that they will be watching. And of course, we, as audience members, are watching Claudius and Polonius as audience members, and meanwhile Hamlet and Ophelia are serving as actors that Claudius and Polonius are also watching. And then Hamlet enters and delivers probably the most famous soliloquy in all of English literature: to be or not to be, that is the question. Whether 'tis nobler in the mind to suffer the slings and arrows of outrageous fortune, or to take arms against a sea of troubles, and by opposing end them. And so this is a speech about suicide, isn't it? Right? Should I continue to live, or should I finish myself off? Is it better to suffer what fortune puts on a person, or to take arms, to take action? Should one live a life of passivity and allow fortune to determine one's fate? Or should one live a life of activity and, even when one is suffering, end that suffering by taking action against it? And in this case, the action that he's pondering is this one, suicide. But again, he cannot determine whether or not suicide will be best for him. To die, to sleep, no more by sleep to say we end the heartache and thousand natural shocks that flesh is heir to. It's true. Suicide would end all of his worldly suffering. It's a consummation devoutly to be wished for. To die, to sleep perchance to dream, there's the rub. So, although you end your worldly troubles by putting yourself to death, for in that sleep of death, what dreams may come when we have shuffled off this mortal coil must give us pause. In other words, it's true, we end the sufferings of this world when we take our own lives, but is that the end of all of our sufferings? And this really is a speech about the afterlife. It's not just a speech about suicide, it's a speech about, do we end all of our troubles or just the troubles of this world when we take our own lives? In taking our own lives, do we enter into a new world of troubles, right? The world of troubles that awaits for us in the afterlife if we do the sin of suicide. So it's really a question of afterlife, and it's a question about belief, right? Specifically about religious belief. Do you believe enough in the afterlife to subject yourself to suffering there rather than put up with suffering here? And again, it's a long philosophical speech, and that's actually one of the reasons why it is so famous. Hamlet's soliloquy really touches upon issues that human beings have had to face from Shakespeare's time to our time to time infinitum, right? Does one put up with all the problems of this world, or does one hope for better in the next life, if there really is such a thing? For who would bear the whips and scorns of time, the oppressor's wrong, the proud man's contumely, the pangs of despised love, the law's delay? Who would bear all these things? Who would bear all these things? Who would end these things with the striking of a knife against one's bare breast? But that the dread of something after death. Everyone would kill themselves. If really this world was the end of all things, everyone would kill themselves rather than to put up with all of this. Who wouldn't make his own quietus if he had the chance? Except that there is the dread of something after death. The fact that there might be something else after this, which Hamlet calls the undiscovered country from whose bourne no traveler returns, puzzles the will and makes us rather bear those ills we have than to fly to others that we know not of. What stops people from committing suicide? The fact that nobody who has gone on to the next life has ever returned to tell us what happens there. This is paradoxical, isn't it, right? Because, in fact, the ghost, right? The ghost has come back to tell him of his sufferings in the next life. And yet, Hamlet is not sure whether or not to believe that ghost, if this really is the ghost of a person who was innocent and wrongly murdered, or the ghost that has been conjured by the devil. And so he's still unsure. And so the matter of acting or not acting is a matter that involves one's own conscience, right? People who don't have a conscience may take their own life, but then again, people who do have a conscience, who are worried about more ills that are born after one's death than during one's life, those people who have consciences, that conscience doth make cowards of us all, and thus the native hue of resolution is sicklied over with the pale cast of thought. And again, thought here as opposed to action. When should a person spend time in thought? When should they give over to action? This is the main conflict, isn't it, in Hamlet's mind? To act or to think. And we know that Hamlet really is more of a thinker than an actor. And enterprises of great pith and moment, with this regard, their currents turn awry and lose the name of action. Very, very famous speech. After this to be or not to be speech, it's the play within a play proper starts. Hamlet and Ophelia have a conversation, and remember that Claudius and Polonius are listening in and watching on. Hamlet says, I did love you once, indeed, my lord, you made me believe so. You should not have believed me, for virtue cannot so inoculate our old stock, but we shall relish of it, I loved you not. And so, while he admits that he once had feelings for Ophelia, he now says, you should never have believed me when I told you that I loved you. I was the more deceived, she says. And Hamlet orders her, get thee to a nunnery. Why wouldst thou be a breeder of sins? I am myself indifferent honest. And he says, why would you trust men when all men are creatures that crawl between heaven and earth? All men are errant knaves. Don't believe a single one of us. Go to a nunnery. And when he says go to a nunnery, of course, what is he suggesting? He's suggesting that Ophelia remove herself from any kind of sexual contact, right? And of course, keep in mind that he already has one particular woman in mind. We talked before about a confusion of roles, and he already has one woman whose sexual contact he disapproves of, and it's possible that he is substituting another woman in place of that woman whose sexual contact he disapproves of. Is it possible that he is thinking of Gertrude even while he is speaking to Ophelia? One thing we do suspect is that Hamlet may be aware that he and Ophelia are being watched. Where's your father? It's an interesting question to ask, right? Supposedly they're all alone. What would make Hamlet think of Ophelia's father? Remember, in the earlier scenes, we saw Hamlet pick up on Rosencrantz and Guildenstern spying on him. We saw him pick up on Polonius spying on him. And so this question may arise from the fact that maybe Hamlet suspects that Ophelia also has not been sent to him to have this conversation of her own design, but through the designs of her father. Where's your father? At home, my lord. Let the doors be shut upon him, that he may play the fool nowhere but in his own house. And again, Hamlet is hyper-conscious of this idea of playing and acting. All right? If you're going to play the fool, play it in your own home where you have no audience to judge you. And so we wonder whether or not Hamlet is aware. There's no outwardly sign besides the question about the father, but we wonder about this. And after the play within a play is over, we hear from the audience members. Claudius notes there's something in his soul over which his melancholy sits on brood, and I do doubt the hatch and disclose will be of some danger. Claudius realizes that whatever it is that Hamlet is undergoing, it will be dangerous, and it will be dangerous to himself. And so Claudius decides the best thing to do is to send Hamlet off to England. For the demand of our neglected tribute, happily the seas in different countries with variable objects shall expel something settled in his heart. Maybe a change of scenery will do Hamlet some good. But we know that Claudius has contacts in England who can help him with his problem. We'll find out about that later on. Scene 2 begins with Hamlet, again, speaking to the players. Remember, we talked about the murder of Gonzago that Hamlet has asked them to stage. Hamlet gives some very interesting pieces of advice about acting. Remember, we talked about acting being so important. When you act, be not too tame neither, but let your own discretion be your tutor. Suit the action to the word to the action. With this special overstep, not the modesty of nature, for anything so overdone from the purpose of playing, whose end both of the first was and is to hold as it were the mirror up to nature. So what is the purpose of playing? What is the purpose of playing? It is to hold a mirror up to nature. That is one of the importances. Again, to the question of what is drama good for? Why do people play at drama? Drama, according to Hamlet anyway, helps one hold up a mirror to nature. And so, if it's done poorly, it cannot make the it cannot help but make people laugh or grieve, and it may make other people judge you. So again, good acting is very, very revelatory. Bad acting makes you a laughingstock. And as the players are getting ready to stage the murder of Iago, Hamlet has a conversation with Horatio. And here we get a sense of how close Hamlet is with Horatio. Because not only is he going to watch Claudius as Claudius watches the murder of Gonzago to see what Claudius's reaction will be to see this play within a play staged. Remember, the murder of Gonzago will tell the story of a man who murders his brother by pouring pestilence poison into his ears. And of course, that will duplicate, that will mirror or echo the same thing that's happened between Claudius and old Hamlet. And so Hamlet wants to observe Claudius as the play within a play is taking place, but he doesn't want to just have his own eyes. He wants some confirmation besides his own eyes, and so he says to Horatio, "Since my dear soul was mistress of her choice, and could of men distinguish, her election hath sealed thee for herself." He praises Horatio. He praises Horatio's judgment, for thou hast been, as one in suffering all that suffers nothing, a man that fortune buffets and rewards, hast taken with equal thanks, and blessed are those whose blood and judgment are so well commingled. And so Hamlet praises Horatio as someone whose judgment and blood are so well commingled that whatever fortune gives, whether it's buffets, which is hurt, or rewards, which is rewards, whatever fortune gives, Horatio takes them both with equal thanks. He doesn't suffer, he doesn't over-suffer when fortune gives him a bad hand, he doesn't over-celebrate when fortune gives him a good hand. And Hamlet says about such people, when their blood and judgment are so well mixed, they are the best of all people. They don't let themselves be guided by circumstances. Give me that man that is not passion's slave, and I will wear him in my heart's core. And again, so he praises Horatio. And not only does he praise him, he trusts his judgment. He tells Horatio exactly what his plan is. There's a play tonight before the king. One scene of it comes near the circumstance which I have told thee of my father's death. I pray thee, when thou seest that act afoot, even with the very comment of thy soul, observe mine uncle. Okay? He tells Horatio, while everyone else is watching the murder of Gonzago, I want you to watch Claudius. If his occulted guilt do not itself unkennel in one speech, it is a damned ghost we have seen. And so what does he do? He wants to make Horatio a co-witness to the effects of the play within a play. Play within a play. He wants someone else to verify that he isn't just imagining Claudius being startled by what he sees. He wants someone else to verify for him. And so this idea of actors, audience members, becomes doubly complicated, doesn't it, right? On the one hand, who are some of your actors? They are the players on the stage, right? They are the people who are playing out the murder of Gonzago. On the other hand, who else is an actor? Well, isn't Claudius an actor? And we talked before about witting and unwitting actors. Claudius is an unwitting actor on the stage where Hamlet and Horatio will be audience members. And they will not be audience members to the murder of Gonzago, not to the murder of Gonzago, but to the play about the conscience of the king, right? That's the play that Hamlet and Horatio really want to see. They want to see this play, right? They don't care so much about this play. This play is nothing more than a tool in order to see whether or not Claudius acts according to the script that Hamlet imagines him working from, right? Every actor works from a script. Sometimes a person works from his own script wittingly, and sometimes they can be manipulated to work unwittingly from someone else's script. And in this case, Claudius will be an unwitting actor working from a script that Hamlet has written for him. So Hamlet and Horatio are not only audience members, but in this case, Hamlet is also the script writer, and he is also an audience member. And in fact, because he will be interacting with Claudius while the murder of Gonzago is going on, he is also an actor, right? He's participating in the very scene that he will be witnessing as well. And so it's a very interesting relationship between actors, audience members, and of course writers, script writers. Very important, very, very important scene. Claudius asks him, what do you call the play? The Mousetrap. He doesn't call it the murder of Gonzago. He calls it the Mousetrap because, of course, the entire purpose of putting the play on is to do what? Is to catch the conscience of the king. This play is the image of a murder done in Vienna, and he gives some background into it. And he even tells about the background of the play, and Ophelia says, you're as good as a chorus, my lord. Yeah, no kidding. He's chosen the play. There's a purpose behind it. And of course, Hamlet's his trap is sprung indeed at the moment when the actor pours the poison into the ear of his brother. What is Claudius's reaction? He jumps up from his seat. He's startled. There's a look of panic on his face, and indeed the trap is sprung. Hamlet has got his man. And afterwards, as Claudius leaves the theater in a rush with sweat on his forehead and his pulse racing because his conscience really has been stirred, Hamlet says to Horatio, oh, good Horatio, I'll take the ghost's word for 1,000 pounds. Didst perceive it? Did you see what I just saw? Very well, my lord. Upon the talk of the poisoning, I did very well note him, and here it is, its confirmation. And so we get something important over here. We get the fact that this trick of the mousetrap, it has worked because Hamlet has set up a perfect play. He has sounded out or discovered the hidden motivations of his audience, and he has substituted a script in which the audience member recognizes himself, right? Claudius puts himself within the play and recognizes, oh my God, I'm the murderer. I may be seeing someone else fake murder somebody, but really that's me. The audience member recognizes himself and puts himself into the play that Hamlet has written, right? He has put himself into that play. This is going to be important. And the scene ends with Claudius rushing off stage, everyone wondering what's happened, and Polonius whispering to Gertrude, this is the time. Ophelia hasn't been able to get anything about what is behind Othello's Hamlet's thinking, excuse me, and so his mother, Polonius, tells Hamlet, please call him into your bedchamber and find out what he's all about. Find out what's going on. Soft now to my mother, O heart, lose not thy nature. The soul of Nero entered this firm bosom. Let me be cruel, not unnatural. And so he resolves that he's going to go. He's going to speak to his mom. But remember the promise that he had made earlier to the ghost, which is that he will take revenge against Claudius, but he will not lift a finger against Gertrude. Remember, that was the first conversation that the ghost and he had. The ghost told him, leave Gertrude to her own conscience. Do not take revenge against her. Your revenge must be against Claudius, not against Gertrude. And so he says, I'll be cruel. I will speak daggers to her, but use none. My tongue and soul in this be hypocrites. How in my word soever she be shit. And so the scene ends with Hamlet already having found out the guilt of Claudius and now trying to confront Gertrude about her guilt. It will be a confrontation where he will speak daggers, but he will not use them. And so we go from one success that Hamlet has to the scene ending with the prospects of another success where Gertrude is concerned. I'm going to pause here, and I'm going to split my lecture of Act 3 into two parts. Part 1 of the Act 3 lecture ends here, and Part 2 will begin with Act 3, Scene 3.